You join me today in an ST202 Mark VI Celica convertible. Hello, welcome back to Furious Driving, and today we have another Celica. Well, recently we covered the Mark V, and that was a super rare Carlos Sainz homologation special, which is pretty unusual, but not as rare as this. This is a Mark VI, or T200 series, convertible. Now, while there's at least a few hundred Carlos Sainz's left, apparently there are 26 left of these. Well, the Mark VI was revealed to the world in 1993 and ran 6 years until 1999, and depending which market you're in the world, because this was a global car going to Australia, Japan, America, Europe. Now, depending where you were buying the car, there were two options. Generally it was a liftback or a coupe, but in some markets we were lucky enough to get this, soft top. Now, the convertible started life as a GT coupe, or an unfinished GT coupe, in whatever spec the country it was headed for demanded. Now, those unfinished GTs headed off to Rancho Domingo in California, to American Specialty Cars, or ASC, where they cut the roof off and presumably added some bracing as well, and added a power roof, a triple layered, insulated and very warm and waterproof and windproof, of course, soft top, before completing the build and shipping them around the world. This particular car is currently fitted with a hard tonneau cover, a parade top apparently it's called, which is an interesting thing. If I'd gone out today and it started raining and I wanted to put the roof up, or park the car and put the roof up, I'm not quite sure what I would do with this thing. It's pretty solid. Now, here at the front is where the biggest change happened. Gone are those beautiful little pop-up lights of the Mark V. We love a pop-up light on this channel, don't we? All that's left of that period are the headlamp washers, because this is where the car gained its famous 4-round headlamps. It's more Sora, more Supra-esque, more of a family look. This particular car has actually got the very, very rare dealer option projector headlamps fitted, and even rarer clear chrome indicators, which are completely unavailable now. So this car has been quite well spec'd by its owner. Lots of JDM dealer special parts on this particular car, which we'll mention as we go around it. Now, UK GT cars came with this little kind of cool and slightly interesting rally-inspired, I suppose, spoiler at the back of the bonnet, deflecting air somewhere. I did read somewhere it stopped the bonnet flexing. I don't know if that's true or not, but originally it came with slightly taller windscreen washer jets shooting over the top of it onto the screen and past the wipers. But these apparently are Volvo washers, which sit a little lower and flusher to the bonnet and look a bit better. Now, other JDM dealer option spec things and extras this car has had added are this spoiler, for one thing, and secondly, these smoked taillights, which are actually from a car called a Curran, which is a Japan-only coupe, which is based on the Mark VI Celica, but a front end which is very much more traditional, just standard rectangular headlamps and a flat bonnet that kind of curves over. It looks very, I'd say boring is the wrong word, but very ordinary, traditional. From the A-post back though, it was just a Mark VI Celica, but with these taillights, which this car has now had added into it. I think I may have said this in the last couple of videos about Japanese cars as well, but there's no button or handle on the boot to open it, just a keyhole so you can turn the key, or a tag down by the driver's seat to get into the boot. So if we do that, let's find out what the back of the car's like. And the boot isn't a bad size for a convertible, although weirdly we have still got exactly the same lift up in the carpet for the spare wheel as we had in the Mark V coupe. Underneath it you will find a full-size spare wheel, which is lucky because this car's got larger wheels for larger brakes, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I find this weird that they still haven't come up with a solution to either using a smaller spare wheel or making the hole a bit deeper in the floor. There is nothing else in the way of amenities. There's no lights, no lashdowns, no cubby holes, but there is, behind this panel here, a manual override for the hood. So the interior of the Celica has moved on, and yet it hasn't in terms of styling and materials and everything. It still feels like a Toyota, but obviously a little further on in time. But as you sit and look around and interact with the car, so much of the switchgear does still look and feel basically the same, or at least very similar to the Mark V switchgear. Now, starting with the door cards, this has got the rare live sound option, which I believe is a JDM Japan only specification thing. I may be wrong, maybe it's worldwide, but I know it is quite rare. This gives you amazing sound because you've got 3 speakers in each door, a bass, a mid-range and a tweeter, all lined up there to give you a fantastic sound stage. Also in the door, of course, you've got a big swoopily designed door handle, a sort of semi-okay sized door pocket, electric windows for both front doors, lockout for the passenger window so you can tell your naughty passenger off, don't know why, central locking for both front doors, because these little lock buttons here don't centrally lock for some reason, so you've got multiple door locking options. And just above that, in this little lozenge here, the joystick for the electric mirrors and a little switch for left and right. And I believe these electric mirrors are in fact heated as well when you put on the rear screen heater. This car has got the leather GT steering wheel, which is a 3-spoke, very sporty looking thing with an SRS airbag, because by the time this car went into production, driver's airbags were standard in pretty much everywhere in the world, and as the car progressed through the years, the passenger airbag became standard in, I think, everywhere in the world as well. Or at least everywhere that this car was being sold. There are a couple of nice big chunky stalks here behind the wheel, indicators and lights on the left, and wipers on the right with variable, fully variable interval timing on it as well. There is also a third stalk behind here. This one lifts upwards and the steering wheel violently shoots on a spring to the top of the car and can be pulled down to find exactly the position you want so you can get comfortable. But if Hightower is driving the car, or a Smurf, we'll go somewhere in between. The dials are pretty cool. There's a big central speedo going up to 180 miles an hour, also with a kilometre thingy inside it as well. But then the two outer rings for the rev counter on the left and the twin dials for temperature and fuel on the right are kind of cut away as if they've gone behind the speedo, so it's very exciting and dynamic. Well, that layout is. The font is, it's like Helvetica or something. It's pretty ordinary and pedestrian, but the dials are nice and big and clear. You've got a lovely view through there, and all the warning lights are off to the corners. Now on the Mark V Celica, there was the option on the all 4 air vents for off, blown air and outside air coming into any of the vents. This one seems to only have it on this one driver's vent, so you can have fresh air vent for the driver, but the other 3 vents are purely through this system here. Now above this little driver's vent there is a randomly placed fog light switch, and nothing else there, just that. And over to the left we've got a panel with many items. Kind of mirroring the fog light, we've got the hazard warning light switch and a tiny little green LED digital clock. Very small, very, I don't know, looks a little bit like it's 10 years out of date. And below that, twin vents. This has now had its standard radio replaced with a DAB radio. And we've got another interesting little option here, which is another, I believe it's a JDM dealer only option. On the right hand side, a card tray for your business cards and calling cards, a coin tray which is kind of carpeted, and this is kind of fun, the Toyota original accessory multi-box. Pop that open and the front drops down. It's all carpeted inside. Isn't that fun? For many accessories and multiple items apparently in that box. Now below that we've got some heating and ventilation, fan temperature, recirculate or not, where do you want to point the wind, heated rear window, and a blanking plate for the air conditioning. Now from 1993 onwards, air conditioning, which is CFC free I should add, was becoming far more of a common option, but UK cars didn't really get it spec'd very often. Most JDM cars got it spec'd, pretty much all American cars got it spec'd, but the European and British cars tended not to quite so much, so it's quite a rare option on a UK car. And below that we've got a bank of 3 switches for the rear windows and for the electric hood. So that's all kind of fun, and a 12-volt socket with a lighter in it. Now here we have the 5-speed manual Toyota gearbox, which is a great, lovely, slicky thing. And the reason you should never have an automatic gearbox in a Toyota is this gearbox is so good. This has had a chrome and leather gear knob replacing the original leather-only knob. And behind that we've got what was once an ashtray, but now it has a Japan dealer option card and coin tray, which I've never seen before. This is filled with mini coins to prove it does work, and it's all felt lined so it doesn't rattle, which is quite fun. Then behind that we've got an armrest, which is again another dealer optional accessory which has been found and added to this car. I think there's almost every dealer accessory you can think of is on this car. In the front of it there's another coin tray, because you can't have too many coins. There is a hidden button on the right, and this slides out to give you a bigger hidden tray. And they like their hidden things, because below that there's a hidden T-shelf. The T-shelf on here, useless. It's at an angle, it's too close to the screen, and there's an airbag buried in it, so you're likely to have a cup launched through your forehead. So don't use that T-shelf. Use this T-shelf here for 1 1/10 cup. But the cup here will sit quite happily on top of your extra coin holder. But the rearward cup is going to have to be very small, like a cinema style ice cream tub perhaps will fit in there. Now this armrest does actually sit on top of the original armrest, and it's still here, and you pull the little lifty uppy lever and you have more storage, so your teacups can sit in here. Okay, that's why this rear cup holder no longer works, because this armrest is now blocking it. It wasn't there originally. This is where your sandwiches will sit. You know, your cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off, they can sit in there, and your tea can sit in the tea shelf. Lovely. Now that's not everything this car is hiding. Down here on the left we've got a big old glove box which is absolutely massive. Plenty of room for stuff in there, but if you want to carry even more stuff, there's this thing here which is another dealer option called the Toyota Clean Box. Push the little button there, you've got a load of space in there. It does intrude somewhat into your passenger's foot space. I've never seen one of these before. I didn't even know it was a thing before I saw this car, I have to be honest. It's just a nice little JDM option to store more bits and bobs in your car interior. There's one last JDM option here in the front, and that is the flare. All Japanese cars, I don't know if they still do, but certainly until recently, had to have an emergency flare kept in reach in the passenger footwell. This car has had one added, which I think is very cool indeed, and yeah, hopefully will never have to be used. Let's have a quick look in the back. Now, getting in the back is pretty easy, especially with the roof down. There's a big handle on the side of the front seat which flips it forward so you can clamber in. These seats have actually been retrimmed. They were originally full leather, but that was getting a bit tired and worn out. And also on a hot day, wasn't that nice to climb into? So the owner has had it retrimmed in this kind of part tweed, part leather, which is actually really nice, really suits the car. Now, knee room is not particularly special in the back of it, I have to be perfectly honest. They are nice bucket seats as they were in the Mark V, so you are tucked in quite nicely. The rear seat back is almost beyond vertical, so you're really pushed forward in the chair, and there are no headrests in the back either. There are seat belts for both of the bucket seats, and there's a mat pocket on the back of each front seat. There's no side pockets. There is a big speaker. There is a little ashtray in the back there, but this is quite cool. On the accessory armrest there is, push the button, more cup holders. They have a rear tea shelf. In fact, this carpeted tea shelf in the middle could be kind of useful if you've got any delicate items of food that need to not be bruised. Say a very soft peach can sit on that nice sort of padded little thing there. That might be quite nice. That's nonsense, isn't it? Right, I think I've sat here enough. Let's go take it for a drive. Oh, I can't reach the thing. Now, doubtless, you will be able to hear the exhaust on this car is a little bit louder than standard. It's an HKS aftermarket thing which gives it quite a lot of rasp and bite. And with the roof down, you really, really hear it and experience all the kind of cough and crackle from it. Actually sounds almost Subaru-ish in certain circumstances. It's quite fun. Now, ASC did a really good job of converting this car into a convertible. As there's virtually no scuttle shake in it, and the body is still really rigid and stiff. You don't get any shake, very little rattle at all. Looking under the bonnet, up by the firewall, there is actually a strut brace, which makes a huge difference. I believe it's the same thing found in the GT4. This car being a GT is basically a GT4, but without the four-wheel drive system or the turbo. The engine it uses is actually a 3S GE, which is found in lots of other Toyotas, which, as I say, is a 2-litre, normally aspirated, 4-cylinder iron block alloy head. Tough, reliable, makes a decent amount of power in this particular tune. It's 173 horsepower, and I believe originally it was 165 in the earlier tunes. They did a facelift and a remap in 2007 when things variously changed. But the hardtop version of the car weighs in at 1,265 kilos, so it's not a particularly heavy car at all. And so the coupe and liftback versions will give you a 0 to 60 of about 8.5 seconds, 8.4 seconds or so. The T200 range was like the generic name for all the different variants of different body style, engine combination, and so forth. And this is the ST202. And although the Mark VI was introduced in 1993, it wasn't until a year later, in 1994, that the convertible came to the market. Now, depending where you were in the world, you got different engine combinations. As I say, the UK one is based on the GT. One of the many upgrades this car has had is the brakes, and the brakes in this car are sharp as a knife. You'll cut yourself on the things. Originally, it came with 2-pot calipers behind 15-inch wheels. Those have long gone, and it's now got a Willowood conversion with bigger discs, hence the fact it's now got 17-inch aftermarket wheels, because those big discs and calipers would not fit behind the old original 15s. Now, the steering obviously is power assisted, but it's surprisingly heavy despite that. But it does give an amazingly good feel. You really do know what the car's doing, and it communicates really nicely with you, even at low speeds. I mentioned in the car park the 5-speed manual gearbox. This is an absolute treat of a thing to use. There is just enough resistance in it to know that you're using it, but the gears just slot into each ratio so cleanly, and it's just like they're in grease. It does pick up nicely. Interestingly, it doesn't feel as fast as its 0 to 60 time would suggest. But it's a similar kind of 0 to 60 as, I'm using it as a reference here, my Rover Coupe, the Tomcat. It doesn't really feel as fast as that, even though the paper figures are virtually the same. It's always funny being in a convertible, I find, that you're so aware of every sound around the car. It's just part of nature, if you like. The car does ride really smoothly. Independent suspension all round, obviously. Now, although this is a 6th generation Celica, it's only the 3rd generation convertible. And of course the last generation convertible, because when the Mark 7 came along, that was the last generation Celica, and they didn't do a convertible version of it. Ah, finally. De-restricted. Those brakes are incredible. The pedal is just like rock hard under your foot, and you can hear, because they're grooved and drilled discs, you can hear them hissing when you hit the pedal. And the car just kind of flows into each corner. It's brilliant. And really, the only kind of criticism I'd level at this car in terms of ergonomics is that the handbrake kind of rises up very high and very close to the gear shift, so getting reverse is actually a little bit tricky. There is a little scuttle shaking, you can so hear that. You'll notice the camera's on the front windscreen today, not on the back window, and that's because it's a pillarless car, and whenever I do a pillarless car with the top down, the rear glass isn't rigid enough to hang the camera from. I do like the ergonomics of the dashboard. It's moved on a lot from the previous generation, and it has a real mid-90s approaching the millennium feel to it, with this big kind of strong curve running from behind the dome of the speedo binnacle down into the center of the dashboard and to the center console as one sort of big swooping line. It works really quite well. But typically of a Japanese car of this time, the buttons in the dashboard still have that kind of hard plastic, very solid. They'll never break, but they don't have that kind of nice tactile feel you get from, say, a BMW or a Mercedes of the same time, or even a Ford for that matter from Europe. These are some very pretty lanes I'm driving through, but lots of 30-mile-an-hour limits, so I get about a minute or so maybe to stretch the car's legs, and then this will slow down again. That's an interesting old Mercedes van. And we're off again. Now, the owner tells me she's actually road tripped this car through France quite a bit, and it's really quite a good car for that. And I can believe that, because these seats are deep bucket seats with loads of support. You really do sink into them, and the arms of them, if you like, just really wrap around you. But they're lovely and soft and very supportive. The fabric they've used, this kind of tweedy fabric, is really comfortable. It's the kind of thing that won't get too hot, won't get too cold. It's always nice and comfy. Well, thanks for joining me in this little tour around the countryside in an open-top Celica today. I've only ever seen one other Mark 6 convertible Celica. Well, I've had one other. It was actually this one when I saw it previously. So it's not a common car by any means at all. I hope you've enjoyed having a look around it, and join me again next time for who knows what. See you again later. And those unfinished GT Coupes went off to Santo Domingo. Not Santo Domingo, that's a TV show.